while we're waiting, if everyone doesn't mind, I think, and obviously today's Thursday, the holiday season is upcoming, but this is going to be something that we're going to continue to do into the new year and throughout 2023. If anybody wants to just add to the chat what days or times of day work best for you, whether it's you just need more advance and the day doesn't matter, whatever that is, just let us know, throw it in there, and we'll take note to try to make this as familiar as possible for you guys. Obviously, also recordings will be shared on social media, YouTube, and other places as well. All right, Grant, thanks for hopping on. I'm glad we're able to get you the invite. Appreciate it. All right. Once again, thanks for everybody hopping in. I'll start today, obviously, by giving a brief introduction. I'd love for today to be as interactive as possible. My goal for the next time we run a webinar is for my background to be more exciting than the white dungeon that I have behind me today. But today we're going to talk about something we're super passionate about over at Halite, but also something that I think is a little bit of a topic we want to hop into for retail training and everybody who's out in the industry. So a quick introduction for myself, Daniel Mendoza. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Halite. I also lead our brand advocacy 360 initiative, which is something we'll talk about a little bit. So some of you may have interacted with me before. Some of you will hopefully interact with me in the future, but excited that you were able to join and really appreciate it. Throughout the session today, feel free, we do have the chat up. Sabrina, who you'll see on the list of participants, is monitoring the chat pretty actively. So you can either message her directly or just throw it directly in the chat for us to review. But feel free to be interactive, bring up something. And if you don't mind, and you can put it in your question, if you have one, feel free to obviously take yourself off mute or just say you don't want to be off mute. All possible and available for today. So the goal of the session today, and hoping to keep it within 30 minutes for everybody efficiently of the time. The goal of the session today is talk about what's on screen right now: driving retail sales through training, engagement, and brand interactions, and really bring to light and bring to you as manufacturers of consumer electronics products, companies that sell their product to retail, bring you a lot of data and research that we have been able to uncover over the past 9 to 12 months throughout our platforms in the industry. So as some of you may know, we across our different products, we interact with somewhere around 200,000 sales associates on a monthly basis. We interview them, we ask their feedback on what kind of content they enjoy, the way they like to interact with platforms, the amount of time they spend there. And we want to continue to bring that information down to you. So our goal from this is to bring you all as much value as possible so you can kind of take it into your 2023 planning and maybe think about retail training a little bit differently. So these next webinars for the next 12 months, hopefully, are part of what we're referring to as our Dare to Be Different series of retail training webinars. And the goal is to approach things a little bit differently than we've done historically, because I think in retail right now, we're starting to enter a little bit of an unprecedented time. So the goal of today and the agenda for today, like we talked about and we sent out to everybody, is number one, to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to retail training. Two, collaborate on what that means to us. So we're going to actually walk through 3 specific scenarios that we hear and see from a common basis, and you can feel free to add in anything you want to talk about as well as we progress. Number 3 is understanding the retail training engagement ecosystem. So we surveyed a ton of different sales associates, as I mentioned, but we also interacted with a lot of different brands who we work with, but also brands we don't work with necessarily, and who have pretty robust retail training programs out in the marketplace, and talk to them about what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what things they're achieving success, and kind of put together a success metrics kind of engagement criteria for everybody, an ecosystem that you can strive to uphold as you approach your training program in 2023 23 and beyond. And then lastly, create an execution game plan. So the goal is, coming out of this, you'll have some additional pieces of knowledge and information where you can kind of take that into 2023 with yourself. All right. So the first one, the elephant in the room, and we're happy that it's a nice, cute looking elephant and not an angry one throwing their trunk around. But the elephant in the room that people are talking about today aren't talking about much today is this metric and kind of conversation around what the ideal journey of a piece of retail training and your engagement in store or online with sales associates looks like. And what we really come to understand is that the common situation that a lot of the brands and retailers we're dealing with come to talk about is that retailers want you to train their employees on your products or how to sell your product. You invest in that training because that's what they asked of you. And the assumption that everybody seems to operate on and want to drive to operate on is, we're going to train them, we're going to inform them, and informing them is going to drive them to sell, create that action in store, which is the sale of your product, which isn't wrong. It's really correct. But what we come back with is a misunderstanding of the metrics, the true metrics we're hoping to drive. And what we usually end up with is us trying to posture what low user acquisition, what low user engagement looks like, how it talks about things with directly to your content and with your leadership, and it always tends to leave you wanting more. So for us, different situations that we've kind of identified as we put down is we look at metrics that you can understand typically. So content completions is a great example of a metric that you can understand. So how many completions did we get on the content? How many sales associates took our training? And what does that actually mean? And that's something you can go up and say, okay, here's my completion per dollar spent. Here's the metric that we're hitting and it looks great or it doesn't. The other one we see as kind of that overall struggle is we start to posture in terms of the purpose of retail training. It goes from, we want to provide value up front. We want to inform the sales associate about our product, allow them to create an action. And what comes of it is like, you know what, we're building content so that sales associates have something to reference if they need to sell our product, or if they struggle selling our product in store. If they need something, it's there, and we've put it there, so that checks that box for us. And what we want to do really is figure out how to optimize the investment you're making based upon the requests from your retailers or the strategy you have, and make the most out of your training budget. And by doing that, what we're seeing people do and what we're encouraging people to do is start asking yourself this question. Anytime we're rolling out a strategy, does it have these 5 characteristics in retail training? And I'll kind of explain them each individually. So these are our 5 engagement elements as we're seeing, and this necessarily isn't directly with us, but this is what we're seeing across all the different platforms. And this is how sales associates are coming back to us and asking for things. So number 1 is simplicity. As many of you know, there's a lot of platforms out there. Obviously, there's a lot of retailers, a lot of retail sales associates. And so there's a lot of mind share trying to be taken and captured. And there's a limited quantity of it there. On top of that, we all know that the workforces of the retailers are becoming more efficient. They are asking for less people to be on floor, working cross-departmental. Maybe someone in computing is selling in home theater, someone in digital imaging is selling in mobile. All of that is kind of crossing over. So the simpler your retail training program can be, the better. The second is community. So is there somewhere where people can interact with your brand? Is there somewhere where they can come together with others who are interacting with your brand? And then in that environment, move on to the third pillar, which is consistency. Can we make sure we're having touch bases and interactions with the sales associates on a regular basis, making it consistent from the perspective of keeping yourself top of mind? And then the last 2, which are my personal favorite, are novelty and exclusivity. And a lot of times they work right hand in hand. But what sort of excitement, incentives, motivation are we bringing? So there's some sort of exclusivity with your content. some sort of excitement, some spice to what you're putting out in your retail training program for sales associates. But what does that look like for you, and how are you bringing that across the way? So when you're bringing things consistently to them, every once in a while, there's that spike or there's that excitement that brings them something a little bit more as we go through it. So that's really the base of the framework that we're going to talk about today. And if there's any questions on that, feel free to send them in or hop in and ask. But what we're going to move into now is really the 3 most common scenarios that we see. And I'd love the opportunity, if anybody feels any of these scenarios resonate with you, throw a reaction in the chat or hop in. That way we can interact a little bit on it, or just hop in and ask a question. So with that all being said, scenario number 1, and we're gonna make it very simple in terms of what our visual looks like: completions. So we know in retail, completions is the easiest metric, and as the majority of us on the call roll up to marketing in some capacity, click through, course completions, likes, comments, shares are all metrics we can really wrap our hands around in terms of reports and reporting things up the chain. So for us, it's all about product launches coming, campaign is happening at a certain time of year, back to school, moms, dads, and grads, Super Bowl, Black Friday, holiday, whatever that is. And we have our 2 product launches. So let's put out content during those launches to educate as much as possible. But I'll use nice round numbers for today. But you may take your investment, and I'm just going to use $20,000 as the investment today. But let's say $20,000 is your investment in retail training content every year. You may decide to make 5 pieces of content at $4,000 a piece. We're going to release 3 in the spring, and we're going to release 2 in the fall. And as you know, content completions may bring you maybe 1,000, 2,000 completions. So that brings us 5 or 10,000 completions. What we're hoping to do when we talk about consistency, simplicity, in those items is take completions and find ways to create a more consistent audience that you can interact with. So take that $20,000 and divide it up into 15, 1,600 smaller modules, bite-sized modules that can go out on a monthly basis. They're more digestible to the sales associate. They provide a quick hit of information. They also reach the sales associate in the way that they are most comfortable being reached and engaging with content today. We think TikTok, Instagram Reels, or anything else around those sources. For us, it's take those 5 courses you're going to make, and can we make 12 or 14 pieces of content, smaller bite-sized pieces of content, and consistently interact with those brands. So hopefully every month as you release content, you are bringing them on board. They engage. Those people are eager and looking for the next piece of content because they start to build a little bit of an attraction with your brand. Maybe they understand who you are, the brand, your product. They will start to like it. They've had some success selling it in store. Next month they come back, and that next piece of content also acquires new users as well. So you start to keep your audience ahead. So we look at it and say, hey, you know what? We had those 5,000 completions at the start. Can we get 500 to 750 completions per month? Potentially, maybe 500 becomes 600 in month 2, 700 in month 3, because people start to get excited. And now your 5,000 to 10,000 completions that you started with in those 5 moments throughout the year with those trainings become 7,500 to 15,000 completions overall. So now you've taken your investment and you've interacted. Also, I'd sit there and start to look at and argue and discuss and debate that if you can keep 250 or 500, maybe your product assortment is at Best Buy and it's in 500 locations. If you could get 500 people, 1 person from every store who takes every piece of content throughout the year, and you can track that and understand that, it's more valuable than having a random 500 or 1,000 completions happen during a product launch time, and then a different 1,000 people take your content in the fall because you attach an incentive to it. So that goal is, number 1 is around completions. How can we optimize our investment for completions and spread that investment over the year? deliver smaller bite-sized content, less drop-off, hit the sales associates the way they like being delivered information today and engaging with information today, and then provide value again next month to keep them coming back. All right, I'll take a quick deep breath. I'll give it a moment before I hop into scenario 2 that we're really working for in terms of optimizing everything for us. All right. Scenario 2, we brought back the elephant for scenario 2. So the elephant in the room is that completions is what we talk about in terms of the biggest, that kind of frontline KPI that we have. But what we actually want is sales. And a lot of time, the point of our training is, hey, you know what? We're going to put a training out there. We're going to give the sales associates something and look at what can we get in return from them. And what we want in return is them to sell our product. And like I said earlier, there is a general assumption that they have the ability to sell more when they're more educated and they have more interactions, which is true in most cases. And the evidence reports that. But for us, we want to turn learning into action. So sometimes we always talk about knowledge checks and quizzes. And the reality of it is it's an immediate regurgitation of information. And what we're looking at more is in this scenario, we're giving the sales associate something. And when you're giving something and you build a relationship with someone you can give, it's okay to also make that a 50-50 relationship and ask for something in return. So in this case, what we're looking at doing is, hey, take training with us. That's great. Come in, take our training, get a discount off our product. We'll send you a product. You get a spin to win. You get entered into a sweepstakes. You win something. That's great. Little incentive for you. But what we want in return is, number one, a sale. So I think the thing that we are scared of a lot of times in our content is actually asking. So what is an action plan coming out of the content that you're developing? Can we put something out there, provide information about the product, some sales tips, some objectives, and then say, as your next 7 days, we'd love for you to take action, sell our product, and then depending on how you distribute your information, whether it's through an LMS or in-person interaction, could you actually put a program where you ask the sales associate to come back in and tell you how that sale went? Do you have a program that allows them to collect rewards for actually selling your product through rewards and incentives programs? Is there a SPIF program that you may have with certain retailers? But what is that that feedback loop where you can inform them of something, ask them to create an action, and then support them in that action by asking for something in return? Come back, tell me how it went. Did it go well? What objections did you have? Have them fill out a survey. And what we're seeing right now in relation to this is a much more interactive pathway from people coming back and wanting to give feedback related to the sale, because they know it then influences what they get further down the line and continues to push them in their role. And across the board, we're seeing a ton of interaction with people who are and sales associates in the field who actually want more from the brands they're interacting with than just their content. They want to be intrinsically motivated in their platforms, in their day-to-day. They don't just want rewards and incentives, because we see that because when the rewards and incentives go away, they don't show up unless there's some sort of continued interaction. So how can we give them some excitement to keep coming back and coming in return and bring value in their role on a day-to-day basis? And this last scenario, my favorite scenario, and we had some technical difficulties today with the whiteboard attached to Zoom, and I wasn't able to draw. I do have a beautiful picture, which I typically draw in this, but we'll just talk it through, is understanding the long-term transformation. So for a really long time, as it related to retail training, and this is a Halite thing as well, we talked about learning and development and how we could help change behavior to create a sale. The reality of it is, going back to our original point and moving into 2023, I think it's only going to get clamped a little bit more. Number one, turnover is going up in retail. Also, the bandwidth and the mind share of the sales associate is being spread quite thin. And on top of that, the consumer has more information and knowledge about their purchasing process than they ever had before because of TikToks and influencers and everything else that's out there. So the sale for the sales associate looks completely different. And how you can motivate them to sell your product looks completely different as well. You don't necessarily need to give them every piece of information about your product, because consumers at different retailers are coming in with more of that information. So for us, it's about looking at the long-term retention. So we talk about the long-term, maybe it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, where you're going to interact with a sales associate in their role and wanting to change that behavior over time. That way they can, yes, in learning, it is long-term, and they can change that behavior over time, and they can retain your information. So they can become a brand advocate where right away they're going to bring you up. Because they're comfortable with your brand, they own your products, they're excited about it, and they've had multiple interactions with it throughout their journey. But inside each of those long-term journeys, you're going to have what we call just training loops. So these are these nice little orange and gray circles. That's you at the top. And inside each training loop, you want to inform the sales associate, motivate them to create that action like we talked about in the last scenario, and support them in some sort of community function. And this may be a 7-day process for you based upon the investment you make. It could be a day-to-day thing. It could be a 30-day thing. But for what we want to create that retention over time is as many training loops as possible to make sure we inform them, we motivate them, and we support them. And make sure that in the 30 minutes, maybe it's the shift the next day, maybe it's the next 3 shifts, depending on how much of a connection you have with them, you're top of mind. They took your information and they can go reiterate it back in store. And when someone comes in looking for a television, they're recommending your brand. Or if they're looking for a router, you're top of mind with them because you've had a consistent interaction with them throughout the year. And you come back a month later to come back top of mind again. And then you come back 2 weeks later and give them something short, keep you top of mind. And the goal is consumer insights tell us that 15 to 100 interactions is what it takes to sell a product. It takes to create an influence of some kind over somebody. The average consumer has to be in marketing. That's why, cookies and other ads chase us around the internet until they've reached 15 to 100. But the goal is, can we get those interactions? And it's no different with training right now. We are targeting at Halite 8 to 15 brand interactions every single month. And I'm going to use Best Buy as an example because all the partners on the call, I know you guys sell your products at Best Buy, I'll use them as an example. If you build a training, you may think of that as one completion. But what we're looking at it is, if you attach an accommodation to it, it's actually multiple brand interactions. They come on the LMS, they make a conscious decision to take your content because they see an achievement attached to it. Brand interaction number 1, they resonate with your brand right away. They think it's a cool brand. Let's go win something great. They then take your content, depending on the length of it. It could be one brand interaction. It could have some videos, different objectives. Let's just call it a brand interaction per learning objective that you have. So let's go with a single interaction at that point, 2. They then win the accommodation. They go in store, they walk to the shelf. They see what your packaging looks like. They see the way it's positioned on the store. Great. On the shelf, they interact with it there. They pull the product they want, they go purchase it. And then, so there's brand interaction 3, and then they take it home and actually get to use it. Brand interaction 4. And now you're at a point where you're starting to influence that person to go recommend the product next time. So when we talk about completions, we're looking at things a little bit differently. And if we can provide multiple instances of that interaction with your brand, whether it's take content, come into the community, interact with other sales associates about your content, about your product, come back a month later, interact with more people in the community. We continue to look at those 8 to 15 interactions and see how we do that. So our goal is brand influencers and brand advocates over time, but short, concise training loops. That way, hey, if turnover happens, we still got value out of that person, even though it was a longer term process for them to move forward and actually become an influencer and advocate. All right. On that note, those are the 3 key scenarios that we're really focusing on. And for those of you who interact with the team members from Halite in the future, or interact with different strategies for retail at Best Buy and other places, you're going to see us chat about this consistently and how we can help you with those items, but also looking at yourselves, how can you actually take in information and take that back to the team you currently have. Maybe you're developing training internally, any sort of retail marketing that's going out there to your other retailers. How can you take these strategies and put them forward? Because that's where we're seeing the optimal success. So I will finish off before Q&A at the end, and we've been a quiet bunch today. It's the first one, so I imagine that I'm not surprised by that, but I'll hop in to the last section. So, which is really going to be what like Halite looks like, and I just want to give you an understanding of what we're doing. That way you can take it back even. So anytime we speak to anybody right now, our goal is to help them fill what we're calling is the brand advocacy 360 kind of pie and engagement criteria. So we talked about the engagement criteria earlier: simplicity, consistency, community, novelty, exclusivity. Now we're talking about how you can actually put the pieces in place. So do you have a gamified learning community to allow them to interact? Do you have events that pop up, whether in person or online, to excite them, create user acquisition? Maybe it's HLM, maybe it's a lunch and learn at a mobile carrier, an AT&T location, a Verizon regional meeting, or other things like that. Are you delivering the appropriate product knowledge content to them? The other one that's kind of the real big topic of conversation is, how do you intrinsically motivate? Can you as a brand take what you as a brand stand for and go out and actually provide what we're referring to as personalized upskilling to sales associates to help them be better in their role, help them understand what opportunity is out there? How do they become a better sales associate? How do they approach a conversation with a customer better? So not just extrinsically motivating to sell your product, but actually intrinsically motivating for them just to be different. And then lastly, for us, is obviously all the operational support and administration that goes into running an ideal retail training program. We know most of you being in channel marketing and national accounts, national marketing, national training, et cetera. A lot of the individuals we're working with on a daily basis don't have the bandwidth to do it themselves. So they're always looking to understand how their team can be pieced together. So those really are the 5 pieces for us of that engagement ecosystem. And as I mentioned in the email out and the invitation, and I've been putting on LinkedIn recently, our goal in 2023 is to provide our partners as much value as possible. So we're launching a multi-vendor program called My Retail Training in the new year, like really pushing to acquire new users, incentivize them for being there to gain a greater community. So every time you build a piece of content with us or bring pieces of content to us, MRT is there for you to post your content and have it be up there for free. You build content with Halite, you get that added value, that added access to retail sales associates. Our goal is, if you have questions, comments, concerns, issues, roadblocks you think you have in your retail environment, feel free to bring them up and bring them our way. We're always open to a 15-minute chat conversation, help you kind of audit your current scenario and see how you can get more out of those dollars we're spending. Because I think in 2023, we're all sure excited about some trimming of budgets and contracting in the way it's been, and that's the reality. So for us, we want to do less posturing as it relates to retail training and more getting hard real data to help us drive retail sales through the training and the retail training that's out there. On that note, I was going to draw on this screen, but my technical difficulty with whiteboards wouldn't allow that. So any questions, comments, thoughts that anyone wants to add in to today? I promised before we started I'd keep it under 30 minutes. I think this is the first time I've ever done that and followed through on that promise. So I'm happy about that. Any thoughts, questions, comments as we progress? All right. If not, coming out of today, the recording will be sent to everybody. So you have it. We'll also send a resource to you from a deck perspective to talk about kind of our retail training program and strategy that you guys can kind of take and go. But I really appreciate your attendance today throughout the session and listening and hearing. Like I said, I'm always open to a 15-20-minute conversation about this, to ask some questions one-on-one as well. We'll be at CES in January, and we'll be open to interacting with you there, chatting, finding some time A number of our team members will be down there. So it'll be great, whether it's in the booth or another time. It'll be great to interact with everybody. But on that note, I really want to thank everybody for their time, taking time out on this Thursday for us to interact. And we'll be in touch via email with all the details and look forward to chatting some more. Thank you, everybody.